Want to know what separates the top 1% of traders from everyone else who's burning through their accounts? It's not some secret indicator they're hiding from you. It's not some magical strategy that costs thousands of dollars. And it's definitely not the ability to predict every market move with crystal clarity. The real difference lies in something far more fundamental, something that most traders completely overlook while they're busy chasing the next perfect setup. Here's what nobody talks about. The most successful traders I know spend more time working on their minds than they do staring at charts. While everyone else is obsessing over entry points and exit strategies, the top performers are rewiring their entire relationship with the market. They understand something that took me years to figure out, and it completely transformed how I approach every single trade. Today, I'm going to break down the exact mindset shifts that separate profitable traders from the 90% who eventually quit. This isn't about positive thinking or motivation. This is about fundamentally changing how you perceive trading, how you define success, and most importantly, how you program yourself to think like a professional instead of a gambler. Let me start with a story that might sound familiar. 3 years ago, I was that trader who thought success meant hitting home runs every day. I'd wake up with dollar signs in my eyes, ready to conquer the markets and prove to everyone that I had what it takes. Every trade felt like a life or death decision. Every loss felt personal. Every win made me feel invincible. Sound familiar? Here's the problem with that mindset. When you tie your self-worth to your trading results, when you make every position about proving something, you're setting yourself up for psychological warfare that you cannot win. The market doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your rent payment or your ego or your need to be right. The top 1% of traders figured this out long ago. They don't trade to prove anything. They don't trade to feel important. They trade because they've developed a systematic approach to extracting money from market inefficiencies, and they execute that system with the emotional detachment of a vending machine dispensing snacks. Think about that for a second. When you put money into a vending machine and press the button for your favorite drink, does that machine get excited? Does it feel pressure to perform? Does it worry about what happens if it fails to deliver? Of course not. It simply executes its program function based on the input it receives. That's exactly how elite traders approach the market. They've programmed themselves to respond to specific market conditions with predetermined actions. No emotion, no second guessing, no attachment to outcomes. Just pure execution based on probability and risk management. But here's where most traders get it completely wrong. They think this means becoming some kind of emotionless robot. That's not what I'm talking about at all. The best traders I know are passionate, driven individuals. The difference is they've learned to channel that passion into building systems rather than chasing profits. Let me explain what I mean. Most traders are outcome focused. They measure success by how much money they made today, this week, this month. Every trade becomes a referendum on their abilities. Green means they're geniuses. Red means they're failures. This creates an emotional roller coaster that's impossible to sustain long term. The top 1% are process focused. They measure success by how well they executed their plan. Did they follow their rules? Did they manage risk properly? Did they stay disciplined when the market tested their resolve? The actual profit or loss on any individual trade becomes almost irrelevant compared to these process metrics. This shift in focus changes everything. When you're process focused, a losing trade that follows all your rules is actually a success. When you're outcome focused, a winning trade that broke all your rules feels like validation, even though it's actually setting you up for disaster down the road. Here's another crucial distinction. Most traders think of trading as a way to make money. The top 1% think of trading as a way to build wealth through consistent execution of proven strategies. That might sound like the same thing, but the psychological difference is enormous. When you think of trading as making money, every position becomes about immediate gratification. You're constantly looking for the next big winner. You get impatient during slow periods. You take trades that don't quite meet your criteria because you need action. When you think of trading as wealth building through systematic execution, your entire approach transforms. You become patient. You become selective. You understand that the real money isn't made in the trades you take, it's made in the trades you don't take. The wealthy trader can sit on their hands for days waiting for the perfect setup because they understand that capital preservation is more important than capital appreciation. The broke trader feels compelled to be active because they've convinced themselves that more trades equals more opportunities equals more money. Let me give you a practical example of how this mindset shift plays out in real trading. Last month, I watched the market for 4 straight days without taking a single position. My old self would have been climbing the walls, convinced I was missing out on opportunities, forcing trades just to feel productive. My current self recognized that the market was in a choppy, unpredictable state where my strategies don't perform well. Instead of forcing trades and giving back profits, I preserved my capital and waited for conditions that favor my approach. When those conditions finally appeared, I was ready with fresh mental energy and full capital to deploy. That's the difference between amateur thinking and professional thinking. Amateurs believe they need to be constantly active to be successful. Professionals understand that sometimes the most profitable thing you can do is absolutely nothing. The top 1% have also mastered something that most traders struggle with their entire careers. They've separated their identity from their trading results. They don't define themselves as winners or losers based on their last trade or even their last month of trading. Instead, they see themselves as probability managers. They understand that they're playing a game where individual outcomes are largely random, but long-term results are determined by systematic execution of strategies with positive expected value. This psychological shift is liberating in ways you can't imagine until you experience it. When you stop taking losses personally, when you stop celebrating wins like you've conquered the world, when you start viewing each trade as simply one data point in a much larger statistical sample, trading becomes infinitely easier. The emotional volatility that destroys most trading accounts simply disappears when you adopt this mindset. You stop experiencing those crushing lows after a string of losses because you understand that losing streaks are built into every profitable system. You stop experiencing those dangerous highs after big wins because you know that overconfidence is the fastest way to give back everything you've earned. But let's talk about something even deeper here. The top 1% have figured out how to program their subconscious mind to work for them instead of against them. Most traders are fighting an internal battle they don't even realize is happening. Their conscious mind wants to follow the rules, but their subconscious mind is sabotaging them at every turn. Here's how this sabotage typically shows up. You have a perfect setup. Everything aligns with your strategy. Your risk management is dialed in. But right before you pull the trigger, doubt creeps in. What if this is the one that goes against me? What if I lose money I can't afford to lose? What if everyone thinks I'm an idiot for taking this trade? That internal dialogue is your subconscious mind trying to protect you from perceived danger. But in trading, this protection mechanism becomes your worst enemy. It causes hesitation when you should be decisive. It creates fear when you should be confident. It generates anxiety when you should be calm. Elite traders have learned to reprogram this internal dialogue. Instead of seeing trades as threats to their financial security, they see trades as business transactions. Instead of viewing losses as personal failures, they view losses as the cost of doing business. Instead of treating wins as validation of their intelligence, they treat wins as natural outcomes of proper execution. This reprogramming doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistent practice and deliberate mental conditioning. The traders who master this skill often spend as much time working on their psychology as they do analyzing charts. They understand that technical analysis is only half the battle. The other half is fought entirely in their own minds. One technique that separates professionals from amateurs is how they handle pressure situations. When most traders face a losing position, their stress levels spike. Their decision-making becomes clouded by emotion. They either hold too long, hoping for a miracle, or they cut losses too early out of fear. The top 1% have trained themselves to remain completely neutral in these situations. They've practiced emotional detachment so thoroughly that a losing trade feels no different than a winning trade. Both are simply market feedback that helps them refine their approach for future opportunities. This level of emotional control comes from understanding something profound about probability and statistics. Every professional trader knows that their edge isn't in being right, more often than they're wrong. Their edge is in making more money when they're right than they lose when they're wrong, and in executing enough trades for statistical probability to work in their favor. When you truly internalize this concept, individual trade outcomes become meaningless. You stop tracking your daily profit and loss like it's some kind of scorecard. You stop posting screenshots of big wins on social media seeking validation. You stop feeling devastated when you hit a rough patch because you know it's temporary. Instead, you start thinking in terms of monthly and quarterly performance. You start measuring success by how consistently you follow your process rather than how much money you made today. You develop what I call statistical confidence, where your certainty comes not from predicting individual outcomes, but from trusting that your system will perform over large sample sizes. This shift in perspective also changes how you approach risk management. Most traders think about risk management as a way to prevent losses. The top 1% think about risk management as a way to stay in the game long enough for their edge to manifest. They're not trying to avoid all losses, they're trying to ensure that no single loss or series of losses can knock them out of the game permanently. This is why professional traders often risk smaller percentages of their capital per trade than amateur traders. It's not because they're more conservative, it's because they understand that survival is more important than any individual profit opportunity. They'd rather make smaller, consistent gains over years than blow up their account chasing one massive winner. The psychological freedom that comes from this approach is incredible. When you know that no single trade can seriously damage your account, you stop being afraid of the market. When you stop being afraid, you start seeing opportunities more clearly. When you see opportunities more clearly, you make better decisions. When you make better decisions consistently over time, profits become inevitable. But here's something most traders never consider. The top 1% don't just manage their trading psychology. They manage their entire life in a way that supports their trading success. They understand that stress from other areas of life will leak into their trading decisions. They understand that physical health affects mental performance. They understand that relationships and personal fulfillment impact their ability to remain disciplined under pressure. This holistic approach to trading success is what separates the professionals from everyone else who treats trading like a part-time hobby. Elite traders structure their entire existence around creating the optimal conditions for consistent performance. They prioritize sleep because fatigue leads to poor decisions. They exercise regularly because physical fitness improves mental clarity. They maintain healthy relationships because emotional turbulence at home creates emotional turbulence in their trading. The compound effect of all these factors working together creates traders who seem almost superhuman in their consistency. But it's not superhuman at all. It's simply the result of systematic preparation and deliberate practice applied not just to market analysis, but to every aspect of the trading lifestyle. Look, everything I've shared with you today comes down to one fundamental truth. The market doesn't reward intelligence. It doesn't reward hard work in the traditional sense. It doesn't even reward being right most of the time. The market rewards one thing above all else: psychological discipline. The ability to execute your system flawlessly regardless of how you feel, regardless of what's happening in your personal life, regardless of whether you won or lost your last 5 trades. The top 1% of traders have mastered something that 99% of people will never understand. They've learned to build satisfaction from the process rather than the outcome. They've programmed themselves to feel successful when they follow their rules, even if those rules lead to a loss. They've developed the rare ability to remain completely detached from results while staying totally committed to excellence and execution. This isn't just about trading. This mindset will transform every area of your life. When you learn to focus on what you can control instead of what you can't, when you start measuring success by your actions rather than your outcomes, when you develop the discipline to do what's right even when it feels wrong, you join a very small group of people who consistently win at whatever they put their minds to. The question isn't whether you can develop this mindset. The question is whether you will, because everything you need is already inside you. You just need to be willing to do the work, submit to the process, and trust that consistency compounds into extraordinary results over time. The market is waiting to reward you, but only when you're ready to think like the professional you're capable of becoming. Thank you for listening, and subscribe for more practical trading tips.